This is the second chapter of Zombicorns by John Green, as read by me, Kelly Stinton. Chapter 2. I wonder a lot about Africa. There were a few months when immigration was possible, if you could survive a 90-day maritime quarantine, and if you could get a boat. I assume the virus made it there eventually, that the borders proved permeable. Borders do, generally. I've seen mice flatten themselves to squirm through inch-high cracks in a wall, and mice have nothing on desperate men. But the last I heard, Africa was still clean, and the thought that it might contain human beings doing human being stuff, serving an older, more complicated master than the Zeds served, used to fill me with a kind of hope. I know I can't get to Africa, of course, but even now I find myself thinking sometimes that maybe this manuscript will be found in 1,000 years when things are resettled, that my recounting will be read, that we will be remembered. Surely among the many outlandish successes of AMRV is that it has eradicated from the human beings our original sin, hope. But I don't have AMRV, which means I still suffer from the cruelest disease of our species, terminal aspiration. I'll tell ya, some days I wouldn't mind being infected. But then I'll pass up a perfectly good opportunity. For instance, just this morning I left Mr. President and went out for a while. You know, the smell seems infinitely bad out there, and yet somehow it manages to get worse each day. While I was out, I found a couple dozen Z's planting in a ditch alongside the expressway. They don't plant in rows because they're idiots, and they don't use farm equipment because they're idiots, and they don't plant in spring because they're idiots. So they were just on their hands and knees in the rippling Chicago heat of August, their pointed Z-sticks digging into the dirt so they could plant more and more and more. Prototypical Z's, hunched and slow with skin like a sunless winter sky. And I honestly was going to just let them be, but one of them heard the car, and then one of them stood up, and I had to roll down the window and mow them down in a line with my AR-15. Perfectly good opportunity for infection, and what do? I complete them! Now, I'm not going to pretend my stubbornness has been universal among my species. I've known plenty of zoocides. They walk out into a group of Z's and just let it happen. It's a sad and beautiful thing to watch, let me tell ya, all ritualized and algaic, so that you can almost hear the choral music as the Z's descend upon the convert, and stuff its mouth with a shucked ear of devotion 131Y, the magic maze through which all Zness is possible. The Zification came so fast and so completely that I only found out about devotion 131Y months later in a newspaper that was being used to block out the light in a high-rise on Michigan Avenue. Light attracts Z's. The place's windows were covered with layer upon layer of late-stage newspapers, but even so, on sunny mornings, the light shone through, giving the newspaper stories a layered glow. Which is how I discovered one morning a story one layer behind an advertisement for a sporting goods store. 100% of sampled people with AMRV, as it was then known, because we still lived in a world that contained silence and initialisms, had been exposed to a specific bicolored maize varietal known as Devotion 131Y, which, these days, is pretty much the sole product of the American economy. D131Y gives you the Z's, which you survive thanks to D131Y, which makes you feel indebted to D131Y, in the way that makes you want to eat anyone who disagrees with you. This is not a new phenomenon, by the way. The Romans knew it. Quod me elit me extinguit, they said. That which nourishes me extinguishes me. The longer one hangs around this pestilent planet, the more one is confronted with the reality that the line between people and zombies is not so clearly defined as we might wish. A little off topic, but I hate the word zombie, if for no other reason than its lack of specificity. The Z'd up are not zombies any more than the Spanish flu was Spanish. They're people, or at the very least, former people, suffering from a real and specific disease, AMRV. But whenever I come across the uninfected and said AMRV, no one knew what I was talking about. So on occasion, one has to give in to convention and say the Z word itself. Although all in all, I prefer the colloquially popular Z'd up, or Z'd out, or Z'd, all of which have a certain multivalence that zombie lacks. Anyway, one of the reasons it is important not to call Z's zombies is because they aren't zombies. AMRV, as I said, is a disease. Or, at least it was a disease before it became ubiquitous. In other words, at this point, one could make a pretty compelling argument that those of us without AMRV are the diseased ones. And very little of the zombie apocalypse canon has proven relevant to the world in which I find myself. It doesn't matter if I shoot a zombie in the head or the stomach, as long as I kill it. Zombies will eat my brains, but they'll also happily eat the rest of me. They'll also eat anything else, except for Devotion 1315. It is the consumption of the corn that infects you, but once you get infected you don't want to eat it, because you're too busy loving it. I hypothesize, although I can't be certain, that early victims of AMRV got it from canned corn, because I was the only member of my family who didn't like, and thus didn't eat, canned corn. Anyway, eating anything other than D131Y proves a bit problematic for Z's, because they don't do anything other than plant and water and tend Devotion 131Y. They're stupid. That much is proven canonical. They also move quite slowly, although I'm not sure if it's due to malnourishment or some kind of actual brain damage. The mechanics of infection are pretty simple from what I can surmise. You eat a little Devotion 131Y, and you're infected. And thereafter, you never want to eat Devotion 131Y again, because you just want it to be safe and happy and plentiful. Which is more or less how we used to feel about ourselves. Alright, that has been Kelly Stinton reading Zombified by John Green. It's been a pleasure reading for you guys, and I should have Chapter 3 out by tomorrow, which is Friday, January 21st, I think. Alright, so it's time for me to go start some editing on some application essays for university, and then study for exams, because that is just the way I roll. Yeah, that was weird. Alright, love you guys. Bye.